water only and try and get settled into your rhythm. If you swim slower than like an hour and a half, then you've been going for a long time in that water and you probably need to eat something. So you can eat a little bit sooner on that cycle, as soon as you're settled in. But for most of us, if you're faster than an hour and a half, I generally tell people, get your bearings, get set, half an hour of sipping water and getting settled, and then you can start your feed cycle. So you'll start eating well before you get to the top of the descent. As I mentioned yesterday, some of you folks were not here, exiting transition is ridiculously technical here. There's a couple like 180-degree turns and plenty of places to get going really fast. Do not plan on leaving transition with stuff in your hands or things to do. You want to make sure it's all on your bike and in your pockets at that point in time, so you can actually handle your bike. You know, once you get over the ski jump hill, then you can, it kind of levels out for a little bit. You can do some administrative stuff there when everybody's going a nice, healthy, safe speed. Yes?
What does it generally mean when you're burping a lot? Nutrition.
Well, that means you've got too much food and not enough water in your system. Like that usually happens to me when I take a gel. So if I'm really hungry and I pound that gel, I just eat the whole thing right away. Then I know in 5 minutes later I'm going to have some wonderful volcanic like burp. It's going to burn. I'm going to hate it. So I have to eat my gel like 2 or 3 little bits, even though it's only this big. 2 or 3 little bits with some water as I go. So I would try and space out that food. So if you are eating something like a Cliff Bar or whatever it is,
I think it's
to perform.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe break that down a little bit. Some people love it and some people don't love it at all. So
after about 4 hours, it kind of starts to not taste as good.
Not taste so good. It's good to know. I know the heat also does the thing. Apparently in Texas, when perform is 90 degrees, it's also not tasty.
You might also be taking in air when you're drinking too. Like as you swallow, if you take in air, it'll sit there and you get a gas bubble when you burp.
That's a good point as well. So I'll look at all that. How am I doing for time? What time is it?
6:45.
Okay, wow. Okay. Well, I don't want to go forever. So I'll do a couple more questions, and then I'll talk about the run super fast, and then we'll be out of here. Were there some other questions about this?
How good? I mean, people say I felt really good coming off the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how good do you feel after riding? I mean, like,
that is an awesome
really,
question.
I felt really bad, and I ran fine.
Yes.
But I felt like I wouldn't be able to like walk a mile. But once
Right.
I put all my gear on, it felt great. But
Right.
like, how good do you really feel? Like maybe versus like a half, do you feel like the same?
Right.
Do your legs feel the same?
I mean,
or
I
do you
can't
feel
speak
worse?
for everybody, but in general, I think what most people mean when they say I felt good coming off the bike was meant like they felt really good that they didn't have to bike anymore. Right? You know, nobody in an Ironman, except for like 20 people, like leave that tent running like a rock star. You know, it's a process of finding your stride and getting into it. It's one of the key things about having a good transition process and being focused on something to do in the early steps of the run is that you just start doing it. Because if you stop and think like I'm going to do 146 miles, 140.6 miles in one day, it's just mind-boggling. So you have to break it down and make it into something simple. And you can tell it's mind-boggling because when you tell other people, they're like, you do what? Like how many days do you get to do that? Do you get to rest? What else happens, right? And sometimes in your training, like today, some of you probably rode 112 miles and were like, oh my God. There's no way I want to run a marathon, but you'll do it and you'll be just fine. So it's about getting going as soon as you can and not stopping. I think unless you have planned for a 20-minute transition, I think like stopping in transition to gather yourself and think about what you're about to do on the marathon, I think that's a really bad idea. Like you're not going to come up with any really innovative solutions in those 20 minutes, right? It's not going to happen. And you just lost 20 minutes. You're 20 minutes further away from the finish line. So in general, it's about just getting out the door and putting one step in front of the other. So that's a good segue to talk a little bit about the run. So most people, when they do get off the bike, they're very happy. They give it to the volunteer. Right? You ride back around the school. You hand your bike over to the volunteer at the mountain line. You have to run around the concrete, kind of cracked, not so happy, fun for your feet. Oval to your rack, you find your bag, and you go into the tent, you change, you come out the other side of the tent, they have a couple tables there. You go out the same way, almost the same way you came in, actually kind of more down by the gas station of the Oval, and head out of town. And it's pretty much net downhill for almost the whole 5 miles out of town. We tell people the first 6 miles, you got to give us 30 seconds per mile. slower than your goal pace. Okay, so goal pace in an Ironman is kind of like your long run pace. It's not the pace of that half marathon you did where you killed it and everything was just right and you're going to just double it and do something else to it. It's the pace when you go out and do a bunch. If I took like 10 or 20 weeks of long run data for you, good days, bad days, whatever days, we added it all up and we divided it by those set number of days and we got an average pace for those days, that's probably going to be pretty close to your Ironman time or your average Ironman time. So you take that pace, which should be a pretty easy pace. It's not very sexy running, right? In general, compared to just straight running, and you want to add 30 seconds to that. Okay. So as an example, I'm a sub 3 hour marathoner. On race day here, I am praying to the run gods that I can go sub 3:20, 20 minutes of my open marathon time. But so that means that I have to run like 7:20, make it up 7:20s. Those first 6 miles, I will be running 8-minute miles on this course. And everybody will be going by me, shot out of a cannon. Half the field will look like they're running faster than me at that point in time because they are. And you are being smarter and instead knowing that the race gets really hard at the end when you run out of energy, when you don't want to eat anymore. So you're going to use those first 6 miles to get settled, assess yourself, check out your nutrition, check out your gait, your form, your gear selection, all that stuff, get settled in. When you finally start coming back into town, this is a great course for that. You start coming back into town, you're like, okay, now I'm going to start getting into my steady mode. You make the decision at that point in time, after the 6 mile mark, because then you really are running, and you've got your bearings, and you know whether or not you felt good or not off the bike. You can make an informed decision about the temperature and where you are and how you feel, about what you want to do on the day. But if you decide at T2, running downhill with screaming fans, so happen to leave your bicycle, you're going to make a bad decision. I'm here to tell you right now, you're going to be running. I mean, you see people come out of that transition. Who here spectated Lake Placid before? I mean, people come out of that transition like it's a 5K. They are flying downhill, and it does not last very long. As soon as when the number of spectator per city block dwindles, like so too does the pace. This course again is deceptive in that because it's not that a whole outweigh is free, but you can be generally fast out and you suffer back. You get two versions of that. And you don't really start to see people crack if you're being competitive in your group until that final turnaround on River Road down there. That's where people who are pushing it in your age group, that's where you find out who's got it, who doesn't have it. For everyone else, a lot of people, they start falling apart before they even get to the turnaround out there, and they start walking. And it's because of the nature of the bike course and people making poor decisions, there's a lot of people who walk this course. So your goal is, whatever your pace, is to not walk the bulk of the marathon. If you can run 10, 11, 12-minute miles in an Ironman, you will pass a shitload of people. Seriously. I had one when I coached in Wisconsin, 2005, maybe the ridiculously hot year. 2 kids, stay-at-home mom, pushes the jogging stroller every day, passed by everybody on the jogging path. On race day, she ran 10-minute miles, and she passed 863 people. And she ended up better than the top 50% of the field. She was like, you know what? I'll let everybody else pass me all the other days, but the day that it matters, when everybody keeps score, I will pass them all. And it was just because she ran a steady plan. She didn't have any goals. But if you were to zoom out to the sort of picnic table view and look at all the ants, people are doing lots of crazy stuff on the run. So your goal when you run off the bike here is to not, Grant, see if you can run sub 7-minute miles. You were hoofing it. You were hoofing it. But instead to say, what can I do to my form to make myself settle and find that natural gait that feels good to me for these early miles? Because running a brick workout is not about how fast can I go off the bike. It's how quickly can I find my stride and get into a rhythm. Because this run is going to get hard on its own. You've got to climb a ski jump hill. There's a couple rollers out on River Road, but in general it's enough twisty-turny you can pick a landmark and get to it. You got to climb a ski jump hill, and then you got to climb this hill in a town, and that hill in a town is bad news. It starts at the bottom by Lisa G's, it goes up to the traffic light, you take a left, it goes up past the bicycle shop, past the Stewart's, up to the right, take a right up by the tennis courts. It's not until you pass the brew pub, and all those people having a rocking great time, that it finally starts to level out. And in fact, that road still kind of goes up a little bit, even as you go out. It's like 2 miles of upness. It's not fun, and so your whole race is predicated around what pace am I going to pick, knowing that when I hit that thing, I'm only going to be running a certain level. There's no point in running like 9-minute miles right now because you feel good, putting time in the bank. There is no bank. Do not get that time back at the end of your day. Because remember, if you have to walk, if you're running 10-minute miles, right, sort of middle of the road pace in an Ironman, you're running 10-minute miles. You walk 1 mile, a walked mile is 20 minutes. You walk 1 mile and you've given up 10 minutes. Now remember, during your day you are all like, I need to get in front of that swimmer guy, or not in front of that swimmer guy. Or you're like, I need to get to the top of this hill, or I'm going to pass this draft pack, or I'm not. You're making all these decisions about little infinitesimal pieces of time, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. But on the run, if you walk 1 mile, you gave up 10 minutes. So if you start walking at mile 13, you've added 2 hours and 10 minutes to your race day. There's a lot of really, really fit people who finish in that kind of 13.5 to 15-hour time range because they just made bad decisions and ended up having to walk. And it just added huge swaths of time. So starting off the run appropriately is what's all important. At mile 6, you make that gut call about what you're going to do with your pacing over the course of the day, and trying to pick that most steady pace, because you might be in this sort of raging battle with the guy who does not know that you're battling with him next to you at like 10-minute miles, right? You're just trying to get away from him when he's talking to you or something. Someone may go by you flying towards the finish line, and then you hit the finish line, and like 7 minutes later the guy crosses, and you're like, but you passed me. Well, yeah, he went over and like curled up under a bush for 20 minutes, and like had to vomit his brains out, or couldn't do it, and had to then got back in the race. Like, your race is not done until you hit that finish line. And so when we tell people here, I'm kind of doing some prelude of tomorrow, but for Endurance Nation, we tell people mile 18 is the line. Nothing matters before you get to mile 18. Your whole race is predicated on getting to mile 18 in the run. Mile 18 is where you have permission to start really racing, and that's where you start counting other people who are coming back to you. And that's your mental head game for seeing how many people you can pass before you get to the finish line. Like giving you something to do at that time of your day when it's just so dark, both internally and probably outside as well. But I can't tell you how many times the run is what really matters. We had a guy who's not here this year, Brad, who I saw in front of the Econo Lodge, which is like mile 22 maybe or something on the day. He had 4 miles to go. He wanted to go under 12 hours. He was running 12-minute miles, and it was 11:15. He might have like 3 minutes on his side, So he's kind of walking it a little bit. I just came out of my hotel room, and I was like, hey, Brad. So I ran over. I'm like, let's go. Let's get to the finish line. He's like, no, I want to break 12. There's no way I'm going to do it. And I'm like, well, what's your pace? He's like, well, I'm kind of doing about 12s. And I'm like, okay, well, you have this much time. I'm like, you could do it if you just kept going what you're doing right now. But mentally, he'd taken himself out of the game because he thought he couldn't do it anymore. Another example would be Coach Rich cheering me, right? All day, Coach Rich cheers me and he says, hey, you're doing great, look good, nice and steady. But the last loop of the run, there's no cheering. It's like, move. Like, keep moving, don't stop. Keep moving, focus, forward, move. That internal speak for you also has to reflect what you're asking your body to do at the end of the day. Because anybody can be a rock star early in the run. There's a lot of people, all race week, you will see people, everyone apparently runs 6-minute miles in taper week, right? Like everyone's running around the lake so fast. But on race day, it's an entirely different story. And so you want to be very smart making those pacing decisions based on that. And learning how to run a little slower is hard to do. That's one of our most popular questions on the forum. How do I run 30 seconds per mile slower than my slow run pace? What do I do? So, very important. Okay, I'm going to stop now because I've been talking for a long time and some people definitely are bonking. If you have other questions, please come up. I'll stay here until I answer them all. Otherwise, I'm going to go out to eat. Tomorrow, same protocol, 7:38, 8:30 start in the morning. Like I said, a chance of rain, and a chance of rain grows over the course of the day. So you might get away with a dry start, but the second time through might be wet out there or something like that. So you might get if you're nervous about the wet descent, you might get a first one out, and then you decide what you want to do. If you just go out of town and take a left at the ski jump, and go all the way through the end of the run course, it kicks you out by the Little Cherry, Big Cherry piece. That's like a 14-mile loop or 15-mile loop without any serious crazy descents. So I know people who've done that twice or something like that, taken up 56 and added 70, 84 miles or whatever that is on their day without having to go down this descent again. But the plan is up to 2 loops and then a short run afterwards, and we'll meet here at 5 tomorrow. I'll do the 4 Keys talk, and then if those folks who paid for dinner, we stay here, we eat here as well. But everyone's welcome to come at 5 to do the 4 Keys talk as well. Okay. Awesome. Very cool. All right, so I'm gonna stay up here. Please don't be shy. Come ask questions.
What's up with the t-shirts?
Oh yeah, there's t-shirts in this box. All right, let me set them out. Can I use your table? So here's the story. Some people, I emailed you and said, please tell me your shirt size. If I did that and you told me, then you can get a shirt. But if I never emailed you about your shirt size, then you signed up too late to get a shirt. So I don't have a shirt for you. Okay, so please don't take a shirt because you're going to take a shirt from someone else. I don't have all the shirts here. The rest of them are being overnighted. So it's just first come, first serve.
Wasn't it unisex first and then you switched it to, there were chick shirts too?
I did, yeah. So I would take your gender.
Okay.
So let me see. Yes, I've got it. Very, very organized. So these are the women's shirts. They're kind of folded in different piles.
Sizes.
Yes, there's a size piles, a couple size piles. And then these are the men's shirts. Manly men's shirts. In my room, I think, yeah.
Patrick, you want to shut this off?
Yes, please. Get the red one first.